Welcome to Raising OKC Kids, Conversations with Metro Family in Oklahoma City. I'm Erin Page, and today I'm joined by Stephen Embree, Vice President Communications for the Southwest region of the American Heart Association, to learn more about local efforts to increase access to CPR during this American Heart Month. Thanks so much for being here, Stephen.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to chat.
Me too. And I'm going to kick us off by aging myself and saying, when I think about the American Heart Association, one of my first memories that comes to mind are my elementary school jump rope for heart events. And I'm guessing that a lot of our Gen X and millennial listeners will relate to that. But bring us up to speed to the present day, Stephen. What are the biggest priorities and the greatest areas of focus for the American Heart Association here in Oklahoma this year?
Yeah, it's so funny you say that. A lot of times when we're meeting with new volunteers or new staff members, we always ask them, what's the one thing that comes to mind when you hear American Heart Association? And we do so much as an organization. I mean, we're a nationwide organization and doing a ton of programming and just things all over Oklahoma, all over the country. But Jump Rope for Heart is always one of the ones at the top of the list. That's kind of people's first exposure to Heart Association. So it's interesting to hear you say that. That's definitely still a program that we have, and it's a great one. It's kind of an initiative, new name. It's called Kids Heart Challenge, but it's an initiative. We go into schools and we teach kids how to eat healthy, how to be physically active, and then they also have an opportunity to fundraise for the American Heart Association as well. So an awesome program that we're doing in schools all over the state, and love to get into more schools. I think if anything, the one thing that we saw when the pandemic hit was, kids were no longer in schools, and so because we had that relationship with so many schools, we were able to provide virtually ways for kids to get active even at home, and so it's a great program there. But we're doing so much as an organization. We hit our centennial in a year. So American Heart Association was founded in 1924. So we're coming up on our 100-year anniversary. And it's interesting as you look back over the history of where we started and where we are now. In the beginning, it was truly just a group of cardiologists who were doing research in their own labs and their own hospital and health facilities, and they would find something that worked for these heart patients that would come in, and they needed a platform to share that information out, right? So they formed the American Heart Association, and it operated in that way for the first 25, 26 years or so. And then we kind of got into the fundraising and really funding some of that research that was being done. And so that's when we kind of made a gradual shift. Over time, made huge improvements in cardiovascular outcomes. But we got into the 70s, 80s, and into the 90s, and we saw there's only so much we can do at the acute care level. We've really got to figure out ways to solve this problem before it becomes a problem. And so that's when we started looking into lifestyle changes and eating habits and things that were really for a lot of people, not everyone. Some people it's hereditary, but we started looking at and doing research on what are the things that people can do years before their cardiac event to improve their chances of surviving these things or hopefully not having them at all. And so that's where a lot of the programs that we have in place now kind of originated from that idea. And so we have programs that are happening in rural parts of Oklahoma where if you look at statistics, you can see in some areas in the metro areas, people have more access to healthy foods, fresh fruits and vegetables, where they may not have that access in rural parts of the state. So we have folks that are working in rural parts of Oklahoma to make sure that those options are available. Smoking cessation is a huge thing that we're doing across Oklahoma, and then that leads into vaping and educating parents and teens on the hazards that come with e-cigarettes and vaping, and then working at the state policy at the advocacy level as well, making sure that we're advocating for these heart health policies, and making it harder and harder for kids to get access to these things.
February, of course, is American Heart Month. And I understand one of the organization's goals is for every household in Oklahoma to have at least one individual who knows CPR. And of course, this is really top of mind for a lot of us right now, as we saw the value of CPR when Buffalo Bills player Damar Hamlin collapsed on the football field and had CPR administered. So I understand the American Heart Association advocates hands-only CPR. Tell us more about that method and why it's effective.
Yeah, so we know that up to 70% of cardiac arrest events happen outside of a hospital setting. And the majority of those happen in a home. So whenever something like this happens, typically it's going to be a loved one that you're going to experience this with. And we've seen that of those cardiac arrest incidents that happen outside of a hospital, only 40% of those patients receive CPR. And so hands-only CPR is it's an initiative that we launched a few years ago. And the idea behind it is we know that not everyone's going to be comfortable giving full CPR in a public setting. But the science has shown that just doing something is better than doing nothing. And so we started advocating for hands-only CPR for layperson first responders. And it's as simple as two things. It's number one, we want you to call 911 because if there's an incident, we want emergency help to get there as soon as possible. So the first step in it is call 911, make sure the emergency personnel are on their way. And number two is push hard and fast in the center of the chest. The pace is 100 to 120 beats per minute. And that's really hands-only CPR in a nutshell. And we try to keep it simple because, as I said, the science has shown that if we can just create an environment of these lay first responders who know what to do in an incident, a cardiac arrest incident, we're going to have much more favorable outcomes. We still do certify and train full CPR with 30 compressions to 2 breaths. And so if you were to get fully certified in CPR, that would be the guidelines that you would follow. But hands-only CPR is really an initiative just to, as I said, train everyone in the community what to do in one of these incidents. And so I'll add to that. February is Heart Month, so this is kind of our Christmas as an organization. So a lot happening throughout the month. But we had made the decision months ago for CPR to kind of be the focal point of our Heart Month this year. And so when the incident with Damar Hamlin took place on national TV, that just snowballed. We got more opportunities to train hands-only CPR and invited onto multiple news broadcasts, and everyone wanted to talk about CPR. So it was wonderful for us. It was all of this. I make the joke with the rest of our staff. We've been working for years and years to get everyone to talk about CPR and to learn CPR, and it all fell in our laps overnight. So really, obviously, it was a tragic event that had a very favorable outcome, but it's very encouraging to see kind of what's come from that over the last few weeks.
It was powerful, I think, for people to see that CPR was effective. That is what kept Damar Hamlin alive until he could be under the care of first responders. So
yeah.
When you see something like that happen and everybody's talking about it, I think it's just such a good reminder of why this is so important.
It is. And it's been amazing how many stories have come to us in the last 2 to 3 weeks of people around Oklahoma, a lot of athletes, a lot of high school athletes who had a cardiac arrest incident happen to them in practice and their coach saved them, or it happened in a game. I just saw a video a few minutes ago and out of our Lubbock market that it was a college football player that similar incident, and they had someone there that was trained in CPR. So it's shocking because you don't see, it's not something we see regularly, but it happens a lot. And so the more folks we can get trained and just to know what to do until that professional help arrives, the more people will see surviving these things, which is a good thing.
Absolutely. Explain for us the difference between cardiac arrest and a heart attack.
Yeah, so I will do my best. I'm not a cardiologist. I throw out the bullet points and then bring on the real experts whenever it gets too technical. But At the very base of it, the best way I've heard it explained is it's almost like an electrical and a plumbing issue, right? And so when you think heart attack, you think blockage. So the blood flow flowing from the heart, there's an issue with that. When you think cardiac arrest, it's really more of an electrical issue. So it's that rhythm and where your heart's gotten off rhythm. Now, a heart attack can cause a cardiac arrest. So if the blood's not flowing properly, it can cause your heart to get off of rhythm, and then you can go into cardiac arrest. But anytime you see similar to Damar, when someone just kind of drops like that, that's most likely going to be a cardiac arrest incident where there's that sort of electrical pulse disruption in the heart. And that's really when essentially what's happening is your heart's not pumping the blood to the organs. And so when you start performing those compressions, you're literally pumping the heart for that victim. And so people ask all the time, how long should I do it? I mean, our answer is as long as it takes, right? Or until another professional gets there. So that's why it's so important to call 911 immediately and make sure that professional help is on the way. But I think Damar was on the field for 9 minutes. So they were performing CPR on him for 9 minutes. And then the AED, that's another thing. If there's an AED around and someone, we always tell people to pinpoint an individual and tell them to go get an AED. Because if you just yell out, someone get an AED, someone call 911, there's a tendency for people to freeze or assume someone else is doing it. So we always encourage people, if you're helping that victim, be sure and point out to someone and specifically tell or assign them those duties so that they know that they're responsible for those things. But yeah, it's huge, and it can obviously be life and death. I mean, we saw it, firsthand with Damar.
Absolutely. And that's great advice to kind of delegate out those different pieces of this. And that quick reaction is so important. So that's such a good reminder there. So even if we're acknowledging it's important to know CPR, people still have to make the time to get trained and understand how to do it correctly. There's a really cool opportunity here in Oklahoma City at our own Science Museum, Oklahoma. The American Heart Association and MidFirst Bank debuted Oklahoma's only CPR training kiosk this past year. Tell us more about how this works and how local families can use it to understand CPR.
Yeah, this is a very cool activation. So we rolled out nationally these CPR kiosks a few years ago. And basically what they are, to me, it looks like a video game, like a hands-on video game. There's a screen in front of you, and then there's a mannequin or a dummy kind of in front. And so you get to literally perform the chest compressions on this mannequin, and then the screen will read out your results. So it'll tell you, are you performing the compressions fast enough? Are you pressing? Are you going deep enough with your compressions? And it gives you a score. And so it's a very hands-on interactive opportunity. And it's very exciting. So MidFirst Bank has been a sponsor of ours and just a community partner of the American Heart Association for a very long time. And they were very excited and very adamant to bring one of these things to Oklahoma, which we were very thankful for. And so through that process, we were able to collaborate with the Science Museum Oklahoma, who's super gracious in allowing us to take up a footprint in their museum space. And so it's there on display now. And families that go to the Science Museum can go and they can perform CPR on the kiosk, and then it'll give them out a score. And it's shocking to see when you actually perform hands only or perform chest compressions on a mannequin, really how hard you have to, the compressions have to be and how fast those compressions need to be. Until you've really done it in person, I don't think people really grasp it. So it's a great kiosk. It's a great tool to show folks kind of what it looks like if you were to have to perform CPR. And I think the other thing that it does is it removes some of that stigma. So we talk a lot about, people are hesitant to get involved if they see something happen in public. They may not be comfortable. They may not trust their own skills. And so there's this dispersion of responsibility, right? And so I think just having that opportunity, it takes 2 minutes to go through this thing on the kiosk, but hopefully it'll add a little bit of that a little bit of um, assurance that if something happened, that you would be able to at least perform, the compressions until the medical help arrives.
Yeah, it's so important, and such an easy and great way for families to really understand how to perform CPR. What about kids? At what age should we start involving our kids in getting CPR trained?
Yeah, I think that it that's one of the reasons we're so excited to have it at Science Museum Oklahoma. It is hard to perform CPR, and so age wise, I wouldn't say, probably in the 10 to 12 age neighborhood, you could really expect a kid to be able to perform in certain situations, depending on the size of the child, obviously. But I think the big thing that the kiosk does is removes that stigma, and so it just helps kids learn, what CPR is, and then ultimately, hopefully, spark something so that down the road, they feel comfortable. We worked with the state legislators. It's been probably 7 years ago or so now, to pass legislation that required all graduating high school seniors to get some CPR training. And so that was American Heart Association. We have a very active advocacy team that works with our state legislators right here in Oklahoma, and they worked with them, and got that bill passed with flying colors. And so then the onus was on the schools to actually execute this sort of mandate. And so we came back along and we created these sort of turnkey kits that we could take into schools, and we could say, here are the mannequins, here's a video, everything that you need to meet this mandate. Because we understood, the pressure that schools are under. And so we wanted to make sure not only that we worked to get this legislation passed, but also that the schools could execute it as easily as possible. And so we're doing that right now at the high school level. Schools all over Oklahoma are training. I think the number it's like 30,000 graduating high school seniors every year in the state of Oklahoma. And so that's 30,000 layperson first responders that are going out into the community every year. So we're very excited about that.
That is really exciting. And I know I was thrilled when I was looking at just kind of a list for my daughter's school district about requirements for graduation. And that was one of the things that was listed on there. And as a parent, it was like, okay, whew, I can take that off my list of things I have to teach her before she grows up and leaves home. But it was a lovely surprise to see that on her list of requirements. So I love that you guys made that happen. I understand that statistics are pretty discouraging when it comes to women in particular receiving bystander CPR. Why is this such a problem? How do we move past the stigma and uncertainty? And what protections are in place for bystanders thanks to the Good Samaritan Act?
Yeah, it's very true. Women we've seen are much less likely to receive bystander CPR, and from what we've seen and honestly heard is, people are hesitant to place their hands on a female, and with the stigma that comes along with that. And so that's one of the things that we're doing. We're advocating. One of the really cool things that Heart Association did just this year was, we've created female mannequins just to kind of get past that stigma. Because if you think about it, in any CPR mannequin you've ever seen, is a male mannequin. And so we've started creating female mannequins so that we can, hopefully get past that. One of the things that, if you go through a full certification for CPR, you're going to learn the first thing you've got to do is you've got to get, all the garments out of the way. And so people are hesitant there as well. The good thing is we do have what's called a Good Samaritan law, and that will protect you. So if you are making an effort to aid a victim in any way, you're protected by the law from any possible legislation or anything like that. And so, really, we're just trying to get past that stigma. It's a number of reasons that people are hesitant anyway to provide CPR, but even more so, we've seen statistically for women. And so we're making steps, as I said, to try to get past that. Whatever those various reasons might be, in hopes that we kind of get past that stigma of that someone could see legal action or things like that. People just, I think they're afraid they're going to do something wrong, or be accused of doing something wrong. And we want to train, make sure people know that if it's a life or death issue, and that person needs help, we want to make sure that they have the tools and that they're comfortable to step in and help in those situations.
I love that you are using mannequins that are female.
Yeah,
I think that's huge and not something I would have ever even really thought about as being important. But you're right that that does make a difference. And two, just that mentality, like you said, of doing something that, doing something is better than nothing, even if you're doing it imperfectly. That giving that person more of a fighting chance is so important. And it seems to me like when you're trained in CPR, you just have more confidence in your ability to help in that kind of situation, and you're more poised to act when you see somebody who's struggling.
absolutely. Yeah.
So oftentimes people think about heart disease, heart attacks, cardiac arrest affecting many more men than women. But heart disease is actually the leading cause of death for women in the United States, and almost as many women as men die from it each year. What signs or symptoms, especially those unique to women, do our local mom listeners and the people who love them need to be aware of?
Yeah. So I think a lot of times, and it's probably from film and TV, you think of someone having a heart attack and you think, excruciating pain in the chest where dropping to the floor. And that's kind of the picture that comes to mind whenever we think of someone having a heart attack. And I think it's important to know that um, a lot of times, often, not, in males as well, but oftentimes in females, um, the symptoms aren't that severe. And so some of the things that we point to or we highlight, it's uncomfortable, just regular uncomfortable pressure, or sort of a squeezing feeling in the center of your chest, really for more than a few minutes, or if it kind of goes away and comes back, that can be a sign or a symptom that something's not right. Pain or discomfort in both of your arms or down your back or in your neck or your jaw or even your stomach, and then shortness of breath, even with or without chest discomfort, um, breaking out in cold sweats. And so all of those things could potentially be a sign that something's not right. And we encourage you to reach out and seek medical attention if you're experiencing any of those things that are kind of uncommon. But I think that's the important thing to know, that it doesn't have to be that excruciating pain that takes you to your knees that we kind of see in the movies all the time, and that's especially the case in females.
Yeah, that's so important to really be aware of how different those signs and symptoms can be for women. And it can just be different from person to person. And I think parents in general, but moms in particular, often we ignore our own health or we ignore signs or symptoms because we're so busy taking care of everyone else around us. That we don't always stop to consider those signs and symptoms that we are experiencing. I know we talked about that. I had had some extreme arrhythmia, have had some heart condition situations earlier in life, and put off calling my cardiologist because I was doing other things. I was being a mom, I was being a wife. And it turned out in my situation that I had a very rare heart condition that necessitated a pacemaker and defibrillator being surgically implanted. And so when I think back on that time, it was my husband who really pushed me to make the call. I knew that something was not right. I knew that I was experiencing symptoms that were not normal. And I'm so glad, obviously, that I made that phone call and had the resources to get it checked out and taken care of. So that's my plea to all moms and parents who are listening. If something doesn't feel right, make the phone call, because worst case, nothing's wrong, but you can take that off your checklist, can take it off your worry list.
Yep, absolutely. I mean, mom's health gets put on the back burner, right? Whenever kids and dads, they're always, mom's always got to make sure they're helping everyone else. We started a campaign. It's a couple decades old now, but it's called Go Red for Women. And the whole reason behind that campaign is to fight that belief that heart disease is just for men. It's a men's disease that affects men. When this campaign launched, a lot of people didn't realize that heart disease is the #1 killer of women as well. And so that's the whole goal behind that initiative, is to raise awareness among women that 1 in 3 women will die of heart disease. And so just like you said, the important thing is to know your numbers. So check your blood pressure regularly, know your cholesterol numbers. So really stay on top of those things, regardless of what shape or health you're in. But ultimately, yeah, get with a physician, and really stay on top of those things, so that you can, take care of things before they really become an issue.
Yeah, and if you that jump rope for heart, if that is resonating with our listeners, that means that you probably did that in the 80s, 70s. So that means it's time to really pay attention to your health, as much as we don't want to admit it. Schedule those checkups, and like you said, take your blood pressure, pay attention to how you're feeling. Let's talk about some of those preventative methods. I know that's really important for what you guys do. What are some effective ways that women can reduce their risk of heart disease?
Yeah, so there's quite a few. One is physical activity. Physical activity we've seen is huge, and we really recommend about 150 minutes of physical activity per week. So you can kind of look at that as 30 minutes a day, 5 days a week, and just getting active, whether that's whatever that means for you. So just getting your heart rate up, whether that's walking around the neighborhood at a good pace, or if you're able to, getting out and running or riding a bike, just whatever it is, to get some physical activity back in your life. Sleep is a huge one, and something that really in the past few years we've kind of turned our attention on as an organization and looked more and more at the importance of sleep. We've actually added that to one of our pillars of, we call it Life's Essential 8. It's one of the main pillars that we recommend to people, to be on top of, and make sure that you're getting a good 7 hours of sleep a night, and just maintaining those healthy sleep habits. Knowing your numbers is huge, as I mentioned before. Hypertension is a huge issue in the state of Oklahoma. I think nationwide, 47% of Americans have high blood pressure, and that number is even higher here in the state of Oklahoma. And so knowing what your blood pressure is and then staying on top of it. A lot of times, a lot of us will just, we'll go to the doctor and we'll, find out what our blood pressure is during that checkup, and then we're not staying on top of it. But if we can kind of get a regular, even weekly reading of what our blood pressure is, you can kind of see kind of where you land, and then kind of make lifestyle changes from that. Or if if you have severe hypertension issues, you can seek out medical help for that. So those are the big ones. Eating healthy, eating a diet that's rich in fresh fruits and vegetables and lean meats. If you go to heart.org, we have hundreds of recipes. So eating healthy doesn't have to mean it doesn't taste good, right? So we've got tons of recipes on our website, and cookbooks that you can order, and ways to really dress up those meals, and cook healthy for your whole family. Find ways to sneak those vegetables into your kids' meals, and prepare them in a way that your whole family will love them. And so those are the big things. But ultimately, it's if you are seeing that there are health issues or heart issues, the primary thing is you want to seek medical care. Set up time with your primary care physician, and really get on a plan with them to get ahead of it.
And I'll add to taking care of your mental health. I think is huge. Whether that's some stress reduction or coping strategies, seeing a therapist or a counselor. I know for me, that has been a really important piece of my journey. And when I am most symptomatic is when I am stressed. So I've had to learn that I can have all those other things, in place and be following all of those other pieces, but I've got to take care of my mental health as well.
Absolutely, absolutely, yeah. And that we actually launched a campaign in conjunction with Devon Energy. We've we've seen studies come out from some of the research that we funded that shows the the impact and the toll that COVID took on families and primarily, first responders and healthcare workers. So we recently launched a campaign in conjunction with Devon that really gets at that. Um, Helping people to learn how to talk about, their own mental health, and then really showing how poor mental health can impact your physical health, and showing how there's a correlation there, and ultimately, your poor mental health can impact your heart health and your overall physical health. So absolutely very important to take care of those things as well.
As we close out our conversation today, Stephen, tell us more about how Damar Hamlin is now sharing his story to further the work of the American Heart Association, and how the rest of us non-celebrities can help support your work here in Oklahoma too.
Yeah, we were very excited last week. Damar Hamlin, if anyone follows him on social media, he issued a challenge, and he called it his 3 for Heart challenge. And the goal of the challenge is, number one, to train, so to train people in hands-only CPR. And number two is to support or to give back to the American Heart Association. And then number three is to challenge 3 friends. So Damar wears number 3, so everything has some kind of iteration of 3. And so if you go to heart.org/3, you can put the number in or you can write it out. You'll land on a page where we have a video ready to go. I think it's a 60-second video that walks you through the steps of performing hands-only CPR. So that satisfies that first part of the challenge. Learn hands-only CPR. You can do it quickly in 60 seconds with a video. And number 2 is an opportunity to give. And then number 3, there's an opportunity for you to click through and to share this on your own personal social platforms, and challenge 3 other friends to do the same. Damar did it. He challenged LeBron James, Tom Brady, and Michelle Obama. So that was very, very fun. I think Tom Brady and LeBron James have been occupied with retirement and setting the scoring records. I don't think they've gotten to theirs yet, but we've been told that their video's recorded and they're going to post it soon. But really, we want everyone to do it, right? The goal behind it is to have everyone prepared, in the incident that there's an emergency. And so it's a fun campaign, and we're very, it's unfortunate what happened to him on the field, but we're thankful for what's been a result of it, and thankful for the partnership that he's chosen us to collaborate with and try to get this message out. So we're really excited about it.
That's great. So we can all join in the challenge, and I will challenge our listeners, if you have not yet been to Science Museum Oklahoma, to check out the kiosk. Go check it out this month. Get yourself trained in CPR, show your kids the kiosk, and talk to them about what CPR means as well. Thank you so much for joining me today, Stephen. This has been such a great and informative conversation. I feel empowered. I hope all of our listeners feel empowered to learn CPR if you don't know it already, or to take a refresher course if it's been a while since you last learned it.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me. You can go to heart.org/CPR. You can find CPR training facilities here all over the state, and find locations where you can take those classes. But yeah, I enjoyed it. Thanks so much for having me on.
Thank you. And if our listeners, if you want to learn anything else about the American Heart Association, how you can support the organization, you can find tons of information, those recipes that Stephen mentioned, at heart.org. Thanks everyone for listening. Join us next time on Raising OKC Kids.